Hello, how are you?
Good, good. I'm usually when I jump on, I have a good couple of minutes pause before the other person joins, and I've been prepping myself to give a bit of a speech, build the awkward silence, and now you're here. You're all prompt.
I'm here. I'm very much the punctual type. As you could probably tell from all my emails and questions to you, I'm have to be prepared. So I was like, 12:59, go.
Oh, bless you. Sorry. No, I was thinking the trouble is if you join too early, then there's this awkward sort of couple of minutes of trying to wait for the other person to wolf down their lunch.
Yeah.
But then too late, and then it's all rah! Anyway, it's all good. You're here. How was your weekend?
It was lovely. It was lovely. Yeah, me and my partner were celebrating our little 3-year anniversary at the weekend. We were supposed to be getting married at in the summer.
And my heart went out for you. That's really sad. Really sad.
Yeah, we've had to postpone it by just under a year. So we thought, well, sod it. We'll have a nice day yesterday. Went out for a picnic and that sort of thing, and try not. And then we ended the day by sending out all our postponement confirmation emails to our suppliers and things. So I was like, fun. But hey ho, there's bigger problems, isn't there? There's bigger problems in the world.
Well, yeah, but yeah, at the end of the day, on a micro level, that's still really rough. So I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, don't worry. How was your weekend?
Yeah, good. Yeah, sunny, chaotic. Every time anybody asks me how things are, I'm loud. Things are really loud at the moment. I've got 3 kids at home, and
I was going to say that sounds like a kid's related answer.
But it's all good. It's a happy chaos. Anyway, let's jump in and talk about storytelling and content. It's an interesting one. I'm really looking forward to this chat because it's one of those things, and I said in my kind of preamble before, everybody talks about content. I feel it's a massively overused word. But what I found particularly interesting about your angle on it is the fact that, in the marketing space, everyone goes content, right? And it connects it immediately to metrics, whether it's click-through rate, how can you generate more click-throughs, or, followers and fans and engagement, all those sort of things, which is great. And we need that. But fundamentally, what we're saying here is that there are very sort of core emotive elements to content and generating good content that we need to kind of be aware of when we're working on our content and producing new content, etc. So it's sort of it's an interesting dynamic. Everyone sort of, from marketing managers, look at it and go, right, I need to generate more click-throughs, I need to generate more content.
Yeah,
it's interesting. You're sort of saying, take a step back, let's think about how we write really powerful stories first. So let's jump in. I really want to hear about this. So before we dive in, tell us a bit about you and your journey and who you are.
This is my life. Well, look, I thought I could kind of run you through my CV, or you can find that on LinkedIn. Actually, I think this is a job interview. For me, I think the most interesting thing where I've come is that actually I sort of fell into content. I fell into content by initially being in sales and business development, selling content solutions, initially with Outbrain, and then I ended up in content marketing, strategy and content creation by moving over to Accenture. But actually, here's the thing, for me, ever since I can remember, I've always loved words and communication. Okay. I studied, I think it was 5-6 languages at university, and at any one time, because I was insane. And but for me, it was really about the power of empathy that you can build when you're learning a new language, when you're learning how to communicate. You can understand other people, you can understand culture. For me, really, storytelling and communications has always been and will always be, a huge part of who I am, both in my work, but also what I kind of care passionately about as an individual. I do a lot of, I run a lot of comedy. I've written comedy myself. It's story. It's storytelling. I've always been a writer, whether it's being paid for, whether it's just being personal writing. Years ago, I really wanted to be a travel writer. And then, I got into the working world, went through my CV, and see all that online. But I always wanted to run my own business. I always wanted to be I was horribly ambitious when I was much younger. I was like, I'm going to be on all those 30 under 30 lists. And that didn't end up happening for many reasons. But I always wanted to have my own business. And I just didn't know I didn't have the big idea, right? And that was what kind of scared me. And it turns out actually all I really needed was that push. And I got that push. January 2019, last year, I started as head of content in a brand new company, having left an agency. I'd been for 2 years, started this new role, building a big team, everything from graphic design to content writing, business development, all that stuff. And then 5 weeks later, the company went into administration and made me redundant. Didn't see it coming, obviously. So after quite a few bottles of wine and quite a few calls to people I know, I went freelance, because actually I think you'll recognise this as well. You can really rely on the power of your network if you've done it well over the years, right? Called up a few people and said, this has happened. Have you got any work for me, or have you got any introductions? Have you got any connections? Especially around content and marketing. And the thing is with marketing and content and storytelling, you've got to be a good storyteller. You've got to be a good communicator, which means you've got to be good at building relationships. Mm. And so I was very lucky that I was able to lean on that network and people wanted to work with me. And then I quickly realised that I couldn't keep, this was January last year, I couldn't keep this mentality of just being a freelancer, because I wasn't looking after myself just as a freelancer. I was working, don't tell me the half this because I still do it now, working 14 hours a day or whatever, and working in all rooms of the house, and just not being able to switch off. And so I had to start thinking about the fact that I was owning my own business and running my own business, because I would never treat my employees the way I was treating myself.
Yeah.
And I had to think like that. And then I had to think, well, how do I want to grow this business that I'm running and that I'm speaking to you about? And that really shifted for me, 6 months ago. And now I'm really enjoying, but, kind of tapping into this entrepreneurial side, doing a thing that I've always loved doing. And I'm running this little business from my kitchen table, which I actually think is really funny, because for me, my kitchen is the heart of my creativity.
Yeah.
Really, you can see up above me here, basically all of these pictures here are pictures of food that I've taken over the years but they represent great stories in my life, places I've been, holidays I've been on. I'm surrounded by my cookery books, and it's about storytelling and creativity. I've just, so where I've got to now is running my own content business, running with 2, 3, 4 different clients at any one time, everything from content strategy, content writing, copywriting, social media marketing, and starting to think, okay, how do I maybe grow this? How do I maybe grow this into collaborating with other individuals to grow it further? And it's funny because as I sit here on my kitchen table, a colleague of mine who I've done some work for is actually running a business called the Kitchen Table Community, and he's all about setting this sort of John Ashton, and he's running this community to bring people like me together, and many other people who will be watching it, about how they can kind of be this individual person with this skill set, how you can then grow it, because you might see this as well. There's not enough women who are, yes, they're female freelancers, but how many take that next step and become founders, and kind of run their own businesses on that scale. So that's where I am now.
Amazing. I would love to talk to you further about that, because I love the fact that you're part of our community, our network, because you're such an amazing fit in that sense. Your spirit and your entrepreneurial spirit is it's so infectious. But we're here to talk about content. So tell us, what is content? And because, as I said, it feels like it's very much an overused word, but what is it, and why is sort of young, hungry brands, should they really be tapping into it, and how is it effective?
So I'm going to go slightly against what you were saying at the start. I'm really happy that it's seemingly overused. I don't think it's overused. I think, that horrible question of what is content. And if if you just do a cursory Google, you never really get an answer, because it's a word with no meaning, but actually with all the meaning. Because ultimately, for me, it is everything. So it's bounced around, and I'm happy it's bounced around because it's the heart of everything. Okay, as marketers, as communicators, content is words, it's information, it's stories, it's experiences. And so when you think about that, you think, well, it's product information. Content absolutely is product information. When I moved over to Accenture, a lot of the work I was doing was content led, but it was all about building content machines, related to kind of product information, and then the next step out of that. What are the stories you tell around that? And obviously, you've got all the things we all talk about: blogs, thought leadership, videos, editorial, all that stuff. But for me, yes, you categorize all of those differently. But if we start to think that content is everything we do as brands and marketers, it helps me encourage my clients and the people I work with that even product content can be exciting, and it should be, because now, there's no reason to not be able to breathe life into seemingly boring content. People think that a B2B business page or a B2B product page or any old product page doesn't need to be interesting. Well, it does, because everybody is competing with you now, and there are so many little inventive startups, especially now. We've all seen this at this time now. Everyone's being really entrepreneurial. Everyone's being really pioneering. And that's great. And people are turning, I've seen these case studies, like people are turning businesses around and product offerings in like 7 days, Yeah. So this information has to be interesting, and there's an opportunity for every brand to tell a story and to engage their audiences. And there's no reason why your catalogue information or whatever it might be can't engage and compel people in the same way. And so if you start to think like that, for me, it's all about then encouraging people to keep your audience at the heart of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Because if you give yourself that challenge of, I've got this boring catalogue of products, how do I tell a story with this? Then you have to go back, as we'll talk about when we talk about the principles. You then have to think, what does the audience want with this? What does the user want with this? And B2B is a perfect example, right? I used to work I've worked with B2B for quite a while. And I've fought and pushed against people saying we can't take that risk. We can't use humour in this content, because what on earth would Mr. CFO say? What would Mr. Head of Asset Management say? And my answer was always, well, hopefully they'll say this is really interesting and they'll remember it. And it shouldn't have to be boring and lifeless. Actually, the one thing I always harp on about is that B2B is not to boring, it's actually human to human. That is all it is.
Yeah, exactly.
We are individuals talking to other individuals. That's all it is. Forget that you're talking to an agency, forget that you're talking to a business, because you're not talking to a computer, you're talking to a person at the end of that. And so there's no monolith here. So if you get rid of that concept and you just think about the fact that everything you're producing is content, think about storytelling at the heart of that.
Nice. No, I absolutely, you've got to be convinced. And you're right, it's human at the end of the day. You're always talking to a human being. If you're talking to a robot, you're talking to computers, it's a different animal. But we're talking to humans. And
that might change. That might change in time. But
yeah, exactly. So if we're telling stories, what are your 5 principles? Talk through them. So, and full disclosure here, there are so many more. Sure. These principles I came up with was when I was putting together a bigger webinar all about the principles of creating compelling content. And I was talking a lot about a great plug for a book, actually, for anyone, is Content Design by Sarah Richards. And I think people think, I don't need to read it because it's more about kind of user experience and it's not content marketing or content strategy. But content design, fundamentally principle the government use a lot, is all about putting the user at the heart of everything you do. And so when I was taking that and I wanted to talk about that, I was linking that idea of
keeping the user at the heart of everything you do. And for me, that was a really nice link, this idea of storytelling. And so there are so many more, and I'd love to hear other people's ideas, but for me, the 5 that really came to mind are, number 1, empathy. Number 2, the story arc. Number 3, think like Netflix, or any other, any other provider is also available. Use emotion and think like a speechwriter. And this is something that I've gotten really into, and we'll come back to that in a second. So going from the top, empathy. I think this is the thing I talk most about when I'm talking about content. And I think it's because ultimately, if you are a communicator, if you take, you kind of inject communications into everything you do, you have to understand empathy. I think there's 3 things really: use empathy, create empathy, and then create with empathy. And I think those 3 things are very, very distinct. And create with empathy comes a bit more down to the content design element of when you're creating this content. How does it look? How is it formatted? Make sure that you're considering the user, compassionate design and all that stuff. But ultimately, think about novelists and non-fiction writers and the amount of effort and research they do. I would almost guess that the amount of research they do is probably, equal to the amount of time they spend actually writing their books. And obviously it will change according to subject matter and things. But, they set out to understand the context of the people they're writing about and the facts they're writing about, so that they can tell authentic stories that can evoke emotion, or persuade people, and if you're persuading someone, you're creating empathy, because you're really creating something that's believable and that can pull on the heartstrings, or that can create some sort of resonance. Ultimately, believable characters are what make really compelling stories, and there's no reason why that doesn't need to be the same in B2B content marketing. There's always a protagonist in everything you're writing about. It will often be that the protagonist is the user, but how do you, if you're creating user stories, don't just give me the 3 key facts of they're this old and they do this job and they get the train to work. Like, that doesn't tell me anything. Like, spend some time and create really good user stories, because they are often your protagonists.
Yeah.
I think if you can get under the skin, really get under the skin of their frustration, their challenges, understanding their human and emotional experiences, we're going to be able to create much better marketing experiences. A lot of things I do with clients will be, even if they've done no research whatsoever, and it's shockingly common, I will just advocate for some level of research, and I think people think that research has to be really complicated. It can be as simple as some Instagram stories. It can be a survey monkey that goes out there, their key kind of advocate, whoever. I've got loads of ideas on it, but it allows you to kind of to find out what triggers them, what they love, what they hate, what they don't have in their life, and even social media listening, a brilliant way of going out and finding out what people are saying about you. How emotional are they getting about your brand or your competitors? Use that. That's all kind of insights for you, for your story, which will create that empathy. And so once you've kind of got that in mind, you start telling your story and you create that lovely story arc. And I think I sort of did the jazz hands there, didn't I? I thought that was very maybe that'll be my go-to from now on. Every story we ever read has that story arc, whether we see it or not. It's often quite subliminal, and it's most simplistic. It's a great story, a captivating middle and some sort of conclusive end. But actually, ask yourself more, what's the hook? If you can think about what the hook is for this piece of content, that's the start, isn't it? How are you getting people to actually kind of dive in? What's the reason? What's the reason these people should be coming to this piece of content? I spend quite a bit of time with a writing group. I think it's called the London Writers Salon. And one of the women who runs it, she's like a consulting editor, and she does a load of she edits books, and she's a writing coach, and she talks loads about all these different frameworks for creating and planning a story. And I think it's brilliant, because if you as a writer, and I don't even think you have to be a writer, as you know, you can be a brand marketer, you could be someone who briefs content out to other people. If you can have a good idea of what good looks like, you're going to be able to give much better briefs and get much better, work back and provide much better feedback. And so understand what that journey through that content looks like. What's going to make people engage with the story you're telling? How do you keep people interested? A lot of that will come down to the length of it, the formatting, the design of the content. But we all know, tell a good story and someone's going to stay. And how can I, and the third question you want to ask yourself is, how can I conclude this content in a unique way? For me, it sounds really kind of like gimmicky, but how do you surprise and delight someone? How do you get someone to the end of that content and they go, I never thought about it like that? I didn't kind of expect that ending. Which leads me on to point 3, think like Netflix, because actually you don't want them to really end your experience with you. How do you get them to stay engaging in further content? We all watch Netflix, I'm sure, any other of these kind of providers, and they all use similar techniques, don't they? You get to the end of a film, they give you 3 different options. I'm not going to talk too much about the algorithms they use. They sometimes seem a bit squiffy, especially if you're sharing it with lots of different family members, But ultimately, the principle applies. They give you related content based on your viewing experience, your viewing history. They also don't really let you leave. They're sort of, you're still watching, ... and then they're getting you on to the next episode immediately. How can you take those principles and implement them in your content? So for me, a lot of it is about quality versus quantity. Okay, so if you've got so many ideas of this story that you want to tell, that all of a sudden you've written 3,000 words, no one's going to read it. No one's really going to, no one's going to get past your first 5 to 800 words. So serialize that content. Less is more, which means that you can tell more stories. Think about how you can take that to be a campaign. Give each story a much smaller quantity of content, and then all of a sudden you've got 5 pieces that someone will want to come back for more. And what devices and calls to action can you use to make sure that someone is actually going to come back for the rest, because you've kept them hooked. And a lot of that will be about how you use emotion. So whether you're in B2B or B2C, this idea of emotion, I don't think we use enough. I wonder if sometimes as marketers we think if we go too far down the emotional writing journey, it goes maybe too much toward kind of manipulation. When actually, as long as you use it carefully, it has a really strong effect, and it can often be lacking entirely in B2B. Whereas, as we've said, all we're doing is talking to people, not businesses. If you can use emotion, you're going to relate to people. And so I was working on a client, actually weirdly, at the very start of lockdown, I got a new client, and they're in the space of menopause tech. So they're going out and they're asking tons and tons and tons of women to fill in this survey so they can get all of this information about women's experiences of the menopause, because there's a big not gender data gap, only women have menopause, but there is not enough information and research out there. And so they're asking women to give people a lot of information about their experiences, which is a challenging one. And so when I gave this wider presentation about this, what I did was I included, and I'll happily share it with anyone, I shared the first 4 paragraphs of this introductory blog I wrote for them, which is introducing them as a business to their, to their target audience, with the point of building authority, building credibility, and getting them to believe in the brand, and ultimately tell them why they should give away this data, for want of a better word. And, you know, there was, if I can remember now, there's kind of three key things. One, ask them a question. You know, so, and in fact, let me go back a little bit. The very first thing we did was we gave shocking statistics. So we said something like, you know, 70% of women have experienced X, Y, and Z symptoms, yet doctors don't, you know, acknowledge these, etc., etc. And they really are quite shocking. And most women would go, oh, I never thought about that. You know, especially, you know, a lot of women, I think, would be like, well, I've gone through this, but this is new information to me. And so the question, so then the next step is asking them a question. Does this relate to you? You know, is this you? Do you feel like this? And all of a sudden, you're speaking directly to that very one person who hopefully has experienced something, because we've targeted this piece of content. And so they suddenly feel seen and they feel heard, because this all relates to them and it's shocking. And then we take a step back and we take these two co-founders and we give them 3 or 4 sentences of their sort of professional experience and what drove them to this piece, to this project, which is all about creating kind of equality, you know? So we then go back and we build credibility and authority, while also saying what really struck them and what really kind of drove them to do this piece of work. And again, it's about getting the emotion in there. And so those are the kind of 3 things I did with the piece of content that really kind of drew on emotion, and there were so many more. And then, so finally, thinking like a speechwriter. I think this is something that not many people will think about, and it's something that really the last sort of 4 or 5 months has been playing on my mind quite a lot. I think the state of our government shows us, you know, and it's a political broadcast, but we, you know, whatever, you know, wherever you lie in the spectrum, I think we can all agree there's some really terrible communication happening. And for me, when I look at speeches, the very best speeches do one of 3 things. They inform people, they will celebrate something, or they will convince people, right? So all of those 3 things really need to include sort of inspirational and emphatic language, because you're celebrating someone. You want people to feel emotion. You want to convince someone of something. You've got to change someone's opinion. You've got to inform someone. You've got to give them really clear information. And so if you can analyze speeches written by any, you know, people who are good at them, hopefully, but people through history, people in politics, people in activism, any of these things, you'll find there's really useful tools and skills that they use. And, you know, for example, one of them, which is the most common, is the rule of 3, right? So you can use the rule of 3 to say the same thing 3 times. We all know that as humans, we forget it the first time. We might remember it the second, the third time it's highly likely to sit in our mind. But also, you don't have to make the very same point 3 times. When you're writing something, you can create a sentence, you know, I dream, I think, I speak, whatever. But it using the same sort of format and structure with 3 different ideas. And it's a way of, you know, it's a tool that allows you to build a pattern in your writing or in your speech. And alongside all of this, you can start to build different tempos and different patterns and different kind of rhythm with your writing and with your speech. So people enjoy reading what you're writing, even if it's not a speech, you know, but it gives a little bit of creativity and a bit of kind of art to it. Yeah. I remember one of the last things I'll say on this, and it's not speech writing, but it's the principle of it. A couple of years ago, I was doing political kind of door knocking for a party, and we were told by our kind of head of campaigns, you have to, over the period of campaigning, you have to knock on the same door 3 times, because the first time they won't remember you. The second time you might have an engaging conversation, but the next party could come along and have another conversation. You need to aim for by the time you're knocking for the 3rd time on the door, they're either opening the door to say, oh, hello, and they're already opening the door to tell you, yeah, we're going to vote for you. And we did that. We put that into practice, and that is exactly what happened. We had people, as they saw us coming in the driveway, they were a bit like, you don't need to. You've done your job now. Kind of go away. I'm having a cup of tea. But they then remembered us. And I think, while that isn't, it's all storytelling, because you're telling a story about a party, you know, a political party. You're saying what your campaigns are, you're saying what your policy areas are. And repetition is just such a strong one, but there are so many other devices used in speech writing that you can put into all forms of content and media and communications. So that's my top 5.
Amazing. I'm literally overwhelmed with information. This is such a valuable conversation for me, and I know for everybody who's listening or will be listening. That's incredible. Thank you. So in a nutshell, just to sum up, so create empathy, the story arc, think like Netflix, use emotion, and think like a speechwriter. Yeah, exactly. Awesome. The your full piece is on the Pioneering Spirits landing page that we've got, so engineerspioneers.com/pioneering spirit. And yeah, and then obviously if anyone wants to get in touch with Rachel, then get in touch with us and we can put you guys, connect you up. So thank you, Rachel, so much. This has been amazing. You. And
it's really refreshing doing you know, a webinar type thing where you can see the other person you're speaking to. Oh my God, I've done my series.
Thing. There are other people out there. I'd like to say hello to all of you. But it's a chat, and I love these chats anyway. I have them every time, you know, someone new comes on board, and I always intend to keep it to a certain amount of time, and I always end up running over because I just love hearing people's individual stories and their passions about the different areas that they work in, and you are definitely someone who's very passionate about this. So thank you so much. What I was saying in the beginning, before you jumped on, was the fact that we are, as you know, we're taking a short break for Pioneering Spirit. I think it's sort of about time, since we're coming out of lockdown, get everybody back into the new normal, whatever that is. And we will be back soon. So just to let everybody know, we're not gone forever. Anyway, thank you, and have an amazing rest of the day, Rachel.
And you. Thanks so much, Bryony.
Bye.
Bye.